Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Future Hacker. This is your host, Maria Taide, and let's just take some minutes to listen to that. Today we're talking to Yair Yona. He's a Tel Aviv-based entrepreneur in the fields of digital marketing, music, and culture. He had been an active musician in a number of local bands, along with releasing music as a solo act, as you just heard. You can just search in YouTube, Yair Yona. This one, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. Also, I just love the titles of his songs. And, at the end of this interview, we're going to put a little more so you can all listen as well. He was a radio show host, a record store guy, a CMO in 3 startups, and manager and co-manager of 3 indie records labels. Yair's current projects are his digital marketing angel, Lentils, that focus on promoting impact and social awareness crowdfunding campaigns for NGOs and startups. He's a partner in Tel Aviv's Capsula, genre-blending art events, and hosts the Untitled workshop about day-to-day personal empowerment for effective work, projects, and tasks management. Yair is married to Mirav, father of Tamara, and a humble owner of Martha the dog. I just love your introduction, Yair. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
It was such a pleasure preparing your interview, especially the part that I was searching for your songs and listening to it. So, you're an artist, beautiful compositions, a creator. You say you are into creating massive value to people, to the world. What do you think in your journey, in your story, made you who you are today?
Well, I think it's like a great entry question, and it's also a great summary question to the end of our discussion because it's such a huge question. I think it's very difficult to track that one point in your life, but I think one of the key events that I had in my life that I think had a direct influence on me as a person or as just like a human being and a career person simultaneously. I think it was when I was 13, I had my bar mitzvah, as most Jewish Israeli or Jewish in general 13-year-old boys do. And we had that party and it was great. And when the last of the guests left the hall, we had like a huge cake, like, 17,000 floors of a cake, something that is totally sugar rush when it was not something in people's awareness, This was like hundreds and thousands of kilograms of tons of sugars. But it was like a huge cake, and what do you do with that kind of cake? I mean, you cannot take it home because no one's going to eat it. But I remember it was standing like there, and I thought we were going to leave it there for someone. And my father told me, just like after a few minutes after the last person left, he told me, go pack the cake, we're leaving. And I was like, are we taking the cake home? Who's going to eat it? What are we going to do with the cake? And he didn't tell me where we're going. And we entered the car and we traveled for some time, and we arrived to a hospital. He took me by the hand, told me to take the cake with me, and we went upstairs to the children department in the hospital. And he told me, go give it to the nurse and tell her you want to share your happiness with all the kids who are staying right there in the hospital because of their illnesses and stuff. And I think that event of generosity really left a huge impact on my life. There's always this big lesson that you took from your parents. I think this is the biggest lesson of them all.
That is such an impactful story. And one of the things that I loved about these conversations we've been having is that everybody that I'm talking to that are trying to make this positive impact in the world. And I ask, why? What's the story behind that? What is moving you? Usually the answer is always around the family and how you were raised, and there's this specific event that marked the person. And it just make me more aware, even more, and I hope the listeners as well, as our responsibility as parents, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, being a young parent, fresh young parent that I am now, father to a almost 9 months old baby, I realize now how much of effect I have on her life, because it's something that rationally you know it, but you need to be in the situation of becoming a parent to really understand how much every time that I snooze, it has some sort of an impact. Every time that I cough, it has some sort of an impact on her. So I mean, we can definitely make the next generation, tremendously better if we take the responsibility on ourselves to be the educators that we might not had in our teenage years. You cannot really tolerate anything. You shouldn't be tolerating anything that is wrong. It should bother you as much as possible. When it starts to bother you, then that's the first step of change that the world needs, because then you'll be somewhat the advocate, you'll be the ambassador of the change in that specific field that you're talking about. I saw it in my own personal life when I started practicing Buddhism about 10 or 9 years ago, something like that, 8, I don't remember. And second, that I was aware of the term of suffering, or the dis-ease or the discomfort of life, I started seeing the dis-ease and the discomfort and the suffering just everywhere. And at first it really bugged me. I mean, everywhere I went, I saw broken things all of a sudden, which is something that I didn't see before that. But I'm very grateful for that, because now I can see things much clearly and then convey the lessons that I learned in my parents' house to make the changes that I am capable of doing.
I think that you kind of started answering my next question, which is, what's the story behind Lentils? So, you were moving in this direction, but I'd like to know not only your goal or why you're doing this. You're focusing on promoting impact and social awareness. So you're already driving us through that. But what's behind the name as well? So it's Lentils. So what's the meaning of lentils in your life?
Well, it started as a joke, basically, but lentils is everything. Think about it. When I became vegan, you don't eat animal products at all. So your protein has to come from plants and vegetables and legumes and lentils and beans. So I thought I became a big fan of lentils because it is such a great present that nature gave us. Like, it's full of protein and it's colorful, it's very psychedelic, and it makes you feel like full. It's a good nutrition for your body. So I started using the term lentils in everything that I did. I mean, like, I had this phrase, choose lentils over wars. I mean, every time you feel like making a war, have lentils instead. And I know it's like a very silly statement, but it was like the obvious and trivial things are there for you to use, and they're probably much better than all the sophistication and complications that we mankind are doing. So then it was like, okay, if there was a company that is focusing on making high-value campaigns, what would be a good name for it? And then it was like, obvious, lentils, because it's always in my life.
And how has it been going to be searching for a positive impact? What's your process, So you're choosing your clients, right? Somehow. Tell me more about it.
And they're choosing me, and they're choosing me, and I choose them. I mean, it's a business and client relationship like any other. It's just like that. Our field of business is more on the crowdfunding campaigns side, and I'm not interested in promoting crowdfunding campaigns to, a new gadget or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with having a new gadget in the world. It's just not something that personally I feel like passionate about. So I say, if we can take our capabilities of writing good content and designing good content and use digital platforms, advertising systems for stuff that are not harmful and has a very good and ethical moral code in how we speak and how we design and the type of stuff that we promote. I mean, this is where it's all joining together. So they come to me, they come to us, and we see if it's something that fits our ethical code or moral code. And off we go. I mean, it's a very simple process. It's just a bit more selective than any other digital marketing agency. I don't take anyone. I mean, there's probably good products and companies and projects that I missed, and it's a shame. However, it's not our focus.
So the next question I'm asking is more thinking about helping our listeners. As much as we have local and cultural specificities, right? Sometimes there are advices that could be helping people around the world when it comes to crowdfunding to social causes and positive impacts, right? So do you have any advice to people that are trying to raise funds through crowdfunding? And being a little more specific, I've already read studies that mentions that when you're trying to raise funds, right, to any cause, it's more effective to focus on the story behind the cause and less on the numbers. Because when you're focusing on the numbers, X amount of people are impacted or you're helping X amount of people, you activate a side of the brain that you're rationalizing. And when you start rationalizing, you start finding, let's say, excuses like, but this is supposed to be the government's duty or whatever it is. And when you focus on the story, you're appealing to the emotional side of people. Do you have any experience to share that you think that is worth or not? Or you think that specifically in Israel, as you told me, you already have this very strong culture of giving back to society is something that is not as much impactful as maybe in other countries?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not sure how it works in other societies, but I do think that Israelis are listed in some reports that I read, listed very high in donation value, the value that they make out of donation each year. And I think it's because of that, be sure that you have like gazillions of NGOs that are trying to attract the exact same people who donate. So it balances eventually. I think that, again, it's very hard to mention tips. I think what you said about creating a story, think about it, Maria, when you were like 5 in the kindergarten, and you had like someone coming to the kindergarten with a strange hat and telling a story about the big fox dressed in red who is trying to eat the grapes, and then the lion comes and is using all sorts of sound effects and maybe costumes to make it. I mean, this is what you were attracted to. It was very important in your world, because when you have a person who is telling a captivating story, this is it. Story is everything. It comes from when we were living in the caves. You had stories crafted on the walls. People attracted to stories. That's the whole thing. I mean, think about it. You'd go to the cinema and you say, I saw a film, it was crappy direction and the actors were horrible, but what a story. But you wouldn't be saying something that is the opposite. You wouldn't be saying something like, it was such an awful story, but wow, that actor was amazing. I mean, who cares if the actor was amazing if the story was bad? So I think it's the same, in a way, it's the same thing. I'm not sure that I support that statement that you don't speak about numbers. It's all a matter of how you're going to do it. If I'm going to talk to your emotions and say, look, you have the opportunity, Maria, to make a huge change in the life of kids in Brazil. And right now we have 2,000 people like you who already joined. Would you like to join us? That's it. I mean, who cares about the numbers? The numbers are just there to augment. It's a supporting element. It's not, of course, it's not their thing. I'm not going to tell you, hey, come support our cause in Brazil. We have 10,000 people who already did that. No, because if you don't know the story and if you're not touched and moved, I mean, think about it. You are a set of values. If I want to be captivating your values, we don't have a common conversation. And it's about crowdfunding, and it's about peace process between two countries. It's about relationships between companies. It's always the same thing. My values and your values has to communicate somehow. This is what it's all about. This is the basic of communication.
And, talking about companies and values, let's keep that road. Companies are now starting to understand that, pretty soon ESG is going to become an obligation and no longer a competitive advantage. We're in this turning point, right? It's a social obligation. This new generation is just going to be a requirement. That's at least what we're hearing, right? So how do you see this movement affecting the market today, and how do you see that in the future? What's your vision about that?
I mean, I'm not an economic expert in no way, but I feel that companies, corporates, and humans will be attracted to go where the herd is going. And if we have like a climate change problem right now, it's obvious. I think it's obvious that, green energy companies will be taking the lead over oil companies. And it's just a question of when. It's just like a natural evolvement of stuff. If you'd asked me in the 70s, do you think that computer is something that the world will go to? Yeah, you'd see that from turning the mainframe computers to PCs or Macs, and you can see the trend. In ESGs, you see a definite trend. The world is going to a better place, but I don't think it comes from a choice. It comes from the lack of choice. But either way, that's the way it goes. You still have like silly presidents who believe that corrupting the environment is something that needs to be done for some reason. I always feel that these politicians has no kids, because if they had kids and they would love their kids, there's no way they're going to leave them a world that looks like that and still supporting, pollution and being a slave to the corporate world. You know what I mean? It's like that song by Sting, when it says, I hope the Russians will love the children true. I'm not talking about the Russians specifically, because I don't like to talk in nations, but it's about that. The only thing that needs to happen is that these people will love their children enough. Just love your children enough, and you won't be making any war, any pollution, anything. It's very simple. It's actually very simple, and it's not really hippie. It's the basic, authentic truth. People should, sorry for my language, people should stop being such douchebags, Stop douchebagging the world. That's what you need to do.
Stop douchebagging the world. That's perfect. That has to be the title of this episode now. Okay, so, we are getting to the end of the first episode. Stay tuned, everybody. We still have a lot to talk about with Yair Yona.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.